This is the Moog Subharmonicon. It's a beautiful piece of analog artistry, a multi-oscillator, polyrhythmic, subharmonic exploration wonder, and one of the most frustrating synthesizers I've ever had the chance of playing around with. In this video, I'll share my thoughts on it after using it for a couple of months, the good, the bad, and who I think this is for, and who it's definitely not. Before I started the actual video, I just wanted to share this tune I made with its lovely sounds. Dreamy, unexpected, sometimes stunning, sometimes chaotic. It's been a real treat to use as a happy accident machine. On the other hand, I can't remember one of my toys pissing me off this much since the days of the original Nintendo and the motorcycle level on Battletoads. Hi, welcome to the Midlight Synthesist. Let's get started. Over 3,000 subscribers now. Wow. Thank you so much for believing in this channel. I can't believe how far it's come in so little time. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. As always, I'll keep trying my best to make videos that are worth every minute that you spend with me. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the Subharmonicon. I'm not going to go in depth on a technical review. I think there are lots of channels that do this wonderfully well. Loopop, for example. So what I can offer is something different. The user perspective, what it's like to actually make music with this thing, and what has been my experience using it as a daily driver for about 2 months now. The reason why I think it's important to have a user perspective on a machine is because just like when you travel abroad, it's something completely different to live in a country and to just go there on vacation. So what is this like if you actually want to use this in your music making production? What's all the fuss about? What's so special about this synth? You see, the Subharmonicon is not your everyday monosynth. The beauty of it is the way that all its oscillators are intertwined with each other and how they interact when you start messing around with the tunings and the tempos. You get new harmonic relations that you don't normally hear every day, and that makes it wonderful for experimenting or just improvisation. I will say this about the Subharmonicon. It is quite unique and unlike any other synth I've ever played. However, when you have something that's based almost entirely on experimentation, it can be very frustrating because what happens when the experiments go wrong? What happens when you just need it to work? And that's one side of the story that I feel hasn't been touched on many reviews. Number 1, digging for gold. If you've been around synths and sound design, you've probably heard about the term sweet spot. And that's what we usually use to describe that amazing sound that can come out of a synth in the middle of all this exploration of all its parameters and tweaks. This, of course, in contrast to those nerve-wracking, baby-waking, divorce-inducing, horrible sounds that come out of your synth while you're tweaking around and exploring, searching for said sweet spots. To me at least, many synths live or die by the sweet spot to crap ratio that they put out. Some synthesizers like Moog's own grandmother is just one huge sweet spot. It's virtually impossible to get a bad sound out of it. The Subharmonicon, however, is a bit different. You see, the oscillators by themselves sound extremely rich. They're completely Moog pedigree. The problem is, you have to combine these with interlinked sub-oscillators, which will behave differently depending on the tuning and the sequencer. So things can get pretty hairy pretty quickly when you're trying to combine the 6 oscillators with their harmonic relationships and the sequencer all at the same time. So you actually have to dig through a lot of mud before you get those golden nuggets. Now, those golden nuggets are amazing. You know, when you actually get a sequence that works on the Subharmonicon, this thing sings beautifully, and it makes it pretty much worthwhile. But this can be very time-consuming, which brings me to my next point, time sync. There are a few synths out there that you can just turn on and start jamming away with little to no setup. The OP1, the Korg Monologue, the Roland System 1, all of these come to mind. The Subharmonicon is not one of these synths. Now don't get me wrong, I am by no means a stranger to musical masochism. One of my favorite devices of all time is my trusty Elektron Octatrack, which is famous for having just an absurd learning curve and being generally intimidating, to put it nicely. It is both loved for its sonic capabilities and hated for all the time you have to spend just learning how to use it. Now, I would humbly like to add the Subharmonicon into that same category. Now, on the surface, this thing looks pretty innocent enough. However, I can't remember another device besides the Octatrack that demanded so much time and effort before I actually got it. This was especially surprising to me since all the YouTube videos that I saw made it seem like the Subharmonicon was just a breeze to get along with. But if you think about it, you have these 6 oscillators that have to be in a pretty good harmonic relationship with each other. And then you have to get those 4 steps on each lane just right so the harmonics just don't break up. But also, you get the polyrhythms, which means that step 1 on lane 1 and step 1 on lane 2 will not always coincide. Actually, that's kind of the whole point of it. So the truth of it is, the Subharmonicon is not this friendly little synth. It's actually a pretty complex mathematical equation. Or maybe I'm just stupid, which is entirely possible. Anyway, don't say I didn't warn you. Number 3, an Untamed Stallion. Yes, this thing is a very powerful beast, but it doesn't behave the way you expect it to. Namely, when I connect a MIDI keyboard to a synth, I expect it to, play the notes that I'm playing on my keyboard, not the Subharmonicon. The Subharmonicon will basically interpret what you're playing and add its own weird scales and modifications to it. So that's another thing that you should be aware of. Hooking up a MIDI keyboard will not necessarily make working with this any easier. Personally, I found that the easiest way for me at least to control it externally was through the patch bay, controlling the main VCOs 1 and 2 through the CV ins that the patch bay provides. Instead, if you try to sequence it via the MIDI input, it'll sequence both oscillators at the same time, and that could lead to unexpected results. And for a minute there, I thought that it was just me who was having issues making this thing work as any instrument should. But look at these comments that I received when I asked people if there was something I'd like to cover on the Subharmonicon. If you check these out, you'll see that most of them are asking about the same things that I had trouble with, namely the sequencer and making it behave with MIDI and, normal behavior. So in order to address these questions, what I'm going to do is a whole other video where I'm going to do a sort of tutorial for beginners on how I set up my Subharmonicon to start tweaking it and make it bend to my will, so to speak. So I just wanted to take a quick second to thank the people who took the time to comment and say that you will not be forgotten. I will make that video for you. Finally, I'd like to add just one more pet peeve of mine of the Subharmonicon, which nobody else seemed to mention. And I'm not sure if this is a firmware issue or maybe I got a faulty device. I'm not sure. The thing is, I'm no stranger to modular synths. I know that they're quirky. I know that they need to heat up the tune, all those analog things that we love and hate at the same time. However, there is one thing that I just hate about this and that frustrates me to no end. You see, one of the things that I really like about these hardcore analog synths is that what you see on the front panel is what you get. So when you turn it off and you turn it on again, it's supposed to sound the same. However, I'm not sure if it's because of the quantization and all that stuff going on around here. If you turn off the Subharmonicon, chances are when you turn it back on, it's going to sound completely different. Now, if you've just spent an hour and a half getting that perfect sequence just right, it is infuriating to turn back on the device and have just complete and utter that's bullshit. So my advice to you would be, if you make a nice sequence on the Subharmonicon, record it immediately, because you don't know if it's going to be there when you turn it back on again. So who is this thing for? For starters, I would not recommend this to someone who's just starting out with hardware synths. This is at best a secondary or third or fourth synth down the line. It makes a great addition if you already have your setup, but as your only device, this is going to be a pain. People who are into ambient, generative, random, those dreamy sequences, this is your jam. This is just a perfect machine for that. You can just randomly generate the living crap out of this for ages. People who are looking for cinematic textures or just background layers of musical pieces are going to find this pretty interesting as well. I myself have found it very inspiring for improvisation with other instruments, like having a sequence that works on the Subharmonicon and jamming away on a piano or another synth, especially since you're going to tap into scales that you don't normally use. However, if your main goal is making music or songs in a more deliberate manner and your synths are your tools to get that job done, I'm not sure if I would recommend the Subharmonicon as a first choice. Mainly because the oscillators and the harmonics and everything get pretty complicated, and you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get that sequence to behave in a way that's usable for your song. The thing is, this thing runs extremely well when you just let it roam free, but when you need it to behave just the way you want it to, you can spend enormous amounts of time just trying to bend it to your will. And that's my main point. For people who have time to spend hours just experimenting and exploring it, it's a wonderful device. But if you're like me, and you're at that point in your life where time is a very, very valuable and scarce resource, then I would rather make a whole song with lots of synths that I can control properly than just one very cool sequence on this one synth. So in closing, while I will definitely be holding on to the Subharmonicon for a little while longer, it will be high up on the list of things I'm going to have to sell for the Polybrute fund. I'm sure I will miss it when it's gone though. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful or at least entertaining. Have a great week. I'll see you in the next one.